Good evening. By virtue of the powers vested in me in terms of the statute of the Foundation for Professional Development, I constitute this gathering as a congregation of the Foundation for the purpose of awarding certificates and diplomas. Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated.
Good evening. Welcome to the Foundation for Professional Development 2022 graduation ceremony. We would like to give a special thank you to the following people: the FPD Board of Directors, VIP guests, the keynote speaker, faculty, assessors and moderators, sponsors and donors, students, family members, partners and guests of students, the Temba Youth Choir, and last but not least, the FPD staff. I would like to call on Casey Chambers, our guest speaker for the evening, to come forward. Casey started at the South African Depression and Anxiety Group, SADAG, as a volunteer counselor in the call center, helping to man the suicide crisis helpline over 15 years ago. Cassie is operations director, board member, and represents SADAG at national conferences, various press and media interviews, workshops, advocacy projects to help fight for patients' rights and destigmatize mental health across the country, focusing on various projects including the Teen Suicide Prevention School Program, rural outreach projects, support groups, responsible reporting initiatives with press and media, mental health in the workplace, and advocacy projects such as life accidemony crisis and medical aids. Welcome, Casey.
Good evening, everyone, and a huge thank you to FPD for inviting SADAG and myself to speak about such an important topic that doesn't always get such acclaim. So thank you for the opportunity to bring mental health into the space. I'm so sure for many of the graduates tonight, you wouldn't mind if I carry on talking for 2 or 3 hours because you haven't had enough lectures already this year, and talking about mental health is something I can do for hours and hours. I have a short time to talk about something that I'm incredibly passionate about, and I feel that in South Africa, so much more needs to be done in the space of mental health, and to be given such a platform speaking to our next generation of health leaders is a huge honor and a huge privilege to me this evening, so thank you. I'd like to extend to all the supporters and loved ones that have come through this evening to support these amazing graduates, welcome. And your space and role is incredibly important, especially since I'm talking on mental health that affects all of us. To the graduates this evening, I ask you now to look to the left of you. Look to the person to the right of you, and the person behind you. Congratulations, you've done it. Well done. In a time when the world was dealing with a global pandemic, and on top of that, as South Africa, we were dealing with so many different things, you rose to the challenge, and despite all of the challenges and difficulties that the last 2.5 years have taught us, you have truly done it and risen above. And to you, I'm so incredibly excited for your next steps, so no pressure. This evening, I'm going to be talking about mental health on a topic that often we think is still too taboo, that happens to other people, that is this invisible illness that doesn't happen to us. And when we look at the stats and the figures around mental health, even just in South Africa, 1 in 3 South Africans will or do have a mental health issue. 1 in 3 is someone sitting next to you right now. It's someone within your household. It's someone that you're going to work with as part of your team. It doesn't happen to other people. Those other people are us. When we look further, that there are 23 suicides every single day in the country, and a further 460 attempted suicides every 24 hours, mental health is at a crisis. But there is still so much that can be done for us to break the stigma and break the taboo. When I talk about these stats and figures and these numbers, I think it's really important that we remember that these numbers are people. These are our brothers, our sisters, our parents, our friends. These are us. And when talking about these important stats and figures to help us realize the impact that it has, it's also to remember the faces and the stories and the challenges, even if those stories are our stories. In South Africa, we don't often hear people say, just snap out of it, it's just diabetes. However, with dealing with depression, we often hear people say, just snap out of it, or my personal favorite, think positively. I represent the South African Depression and Anxiety Group, and we've been around for over 28 years. And I wish for the 3,000 callers that call us each and every day, I wish I could just say, think positively, it will get better. Mental health affects how we think, how we feel, how we behave, how we respond to the world around us. And while all of us have mental health, not everyone has a mental illness, which we commonly understand as depression, anxiety, panic, or trauma. And this is why normalizing mental health for all of us to be looking after our mental health, especially as a preventative tool, for so many of you have spent so much of this year looking at awareness and education and prevention of health issues. Looking at preventing mental health crises means we have to look after our mental health as well. There is a lot of stigma associated to mental illness, and unfortunately in the press and media, the view that we have is of the one flew over the cuckoo's nest. It's normally the people that are kind of portrayed in a headline as crazy or dangerous. And actually, it's the person standing in the pick and pay queue with you. It's the person standing in your row or sitting at class with you. It's us. It's not the pictures that we see in the headlines or the movies of how they portray mental health. And this is where we start to break the stigma as we normalize people who are living with mental health issues, the you and I's and us of the world, to say this is what mental health is and debunking what people think it is. What's interesting with dealing with so many people in the health sector is that we often want concrete information when it comes to health issues. You can get blood tests and go for MRI scans, but when it comes to mental illness, there is no blood test. There is no scan that can say, yes, you have depression. And that's why often we have a society that thinks it's invisible. It's not really real. And in a South African rich culture diversity that we have, there is no Zulu word for depression. Therefore, it's not a real illness. And these are some of the things that on a daily basis we're fighting and creating awareness and having more conversations. And this is where we have the slogan of, mental health matters, and it's something that's used as a hashtag, it can trend, it's used around the world. And we encourage people to make mental health matter in the schools, in our workplaces, in hospitals and clinics, in our homes. And it's something that for you, in order to eliminate the stigmas and those barriers, and to help encourage people to talk about mental health, we're having to make sure mental health matters for you too. Mental health well-being is not just the picture of being happy all the time. Actually, we want you to feel sad. Mental well-being is about feeling all the different things. When things happen, it's about being happy or sad or upset or stressed. But it gives you the capacity to cope and handle the stresses on a daily basis. And being able to do that mental health check-in, which we're so good at doing a mental health check-in on our physical well-being. How is our body feeling? How's our neck? Do we have a headache? Have I eaten? But when last did you start a conversation, and this is so typical within the South African context, especially in socializing or getting together, even this evening when you saw your colleagues. Hello, how are you? I'm fine, thanks. Carry on. Next time you start that conversation, stop and say, how are you really doing? How are you really coping today? And this is my challenge to you with going into the workplaces and working in teams and working with other colleagues. You don't always have to be the leader to start that conversation, but you can do the mental health check-in with your team and say, how are you really doing? How are you really coping today? And what you'll see is kind of a look of confusion because no one's ever been asked, how are you really doing? And that can already start a connected conversation. When we're talking around health and how we view depression and anxiety, and I use these words to make sure that we can start more conversations and we have the language around mental health. Depression is a real medical illness, just like any other physical illness. It just needs real treatment. And for a lot of people, the minute that we can start seeing that depression and anxiety are real illnesses that need real treatment, it's the first obstacle that we can tackle. Society often accepts physical illness because we can see it, we can test it, we encourage people to take their treatment, we understand that they need to take insulin for diabetes, but the minute that someone needs to go for therapy or medication for their mental illness, we think it's a weakness, that they're not strong enough, that they can't cope. And this is where normalizing conversations around mental health are critical. And you as leaders, our next generation, that because you know better, can do better, you're having to go in to break those barriers and encourage people to have more conversations and using the right terms and saying that it's okay not to be okay. In a time that we've dealt with so many changes, and especially now with so many people who feel like it's just too much stress, too much to do, too much to go on, it's really important that we keep that message that it's okay not to be okay, but that there is help and that there is support. Mental illness, when we look at the numbers again as to why is this important, why should we tackle this, and especially you going into the field and working with teams and clinics and hospitals and in the healthcare sector and in businesses that are going to help us to make the change that we need. We have to realize that there is literally a bottom line cost to not treating mental illness. Mental illness affects the workplace. 1 in 4 employees will have a mental health issue. And for every employee who has depression, they're taking a minimum of 18 days off a year because of their depression. But those are often employees who don't feel supported, who don't feel open enough to talk about their mental health issues. We know that mental illness costs billions to South African companies every single year, and we have to do so much to change and encourage those safe conversations in the workplace. And that starts with you, going in and having concerted, connected conversations, being that safe place for someone to say, hey, I'm actually not coping, I'm struggling, I need help. And this brings me to the next idea of what we have in South Africa, where we see our healthcare workers that are portrayed, and especially during COVID, our healthcare workers as heroes. Because they do amazing, extraordinary things every single day, we often put them up on this pedestal that they are superheroes. And what that tells our healthcare workers is that they're invincible, and they're not allowed to hurt, and they're not allowed to get sick. And through initiatives such as the Healthcare Workers Care Network that was launched in 2020, specifically in South Africa to provide free mental health support to all frontline healthcare workers, our healthcare workers were struggling. Whether they were nurses or doctors or porters or admin receptionists, they were really struggling because healthcare workers are people too. They feel sadness, they feel joy, they feel frustration, they feel loss and trauma. And during COVID, those were all really heightened. And it's really important that we break that stereotype that healthcare workers are heroes, because healthcare workers are people too. And they can get sick, and they can struggle, but they can get help as well. And in a culture that looks at not seeking help and having to just push through because that's what it's all about, It takes us to say, we see you, but that it's okay not to be okay, and that there is help. The late Dr. Cindy van Zyl, who was a general practitioner as well as a mental health advocate and was really popular and inspirational on various radio platforms and on social media, she used to start many conversations on difficult topics and normalize them. And one of her really important analogies that she helped, especially for people working in the healthcare sector, was around looking at our mental wellness as a bucket. We've often heard the term, fill your cup, do things that fill your cup. And I think during COVID, our cup was broken. But instead of having a bucket, and sometimes our buckets have one hole, sometimes they have 10 holes, sometimes they're battered and bruised. And as we're adding different things, so that water, adding different liquids, different colors, different jugs and sizes, depending on what you're dealing with on a daily basis, that falls through the bucket, sometimes quicker, sometimes not as much, and your bucket gets empty really quickly. And as someone working on the front line and working in the healthcare sector, when your bucket is empty, it's really hard to help other people and share what's in your bucket with someone else who needs it. So what she encouraged us to do when looking at what our bucket looked like is to how do we plug those holes? How do we fill up our bucket more with different things that perhaps are not liquid, that can quickly go through the holes, but are things that really do fill up our bucket and look after ourselves? Because if our bucket is full, we're able to share what's in our bucket with other people. And I think that's exactly what many of us often feel, is that we're overwhelmed, we're not sure how to cope or to manage in a time when we've just adjusted and carried on and regulations have changed and you've taken on extra responsibilities of even studying and doing more and showing up more than ever before. Some of you might have had all-nighters, even stress, tried to juggle a million different things and felt it sometimes really overwhelmed. And I think it's really important that we share and openly discuss what are different ways that can look after our mental health. We're all really good at sharing recipes or which restaurants to go to or what new books to read. But we're not always open about sharing what actually helps us and fill up our bucket, or if you even have a cup. And that self-care could look at different things of looking after your body, making sure that you're resting and getting enough sleep. It could be connecting. It could even be making sure that you're eating correctly. Mindfulness is a key topic that has come up during COVID, and there's so many different resources that you could look at that look at filling up your bucket. But how do we make looking after our mental health intentional, important, and prioritized on our list? And why should we, right? We're fine. We can carry on. We can do so much. We're invincible. If you don't look after yourself, you're not able to look after others. And this is where it's so important that as leaders who have gone out and learned so much, and it reminds me of the really famous saying in one of the Spider-Man movies, Spider-Man's uncle, who says, with great power comes great responsibility. And with great power and knowledge comes the responsibility of helping others in your circle, people that will look up to you, that you would role model your behavior so they can learn from you. One of the key themes that we've used a lot at SADAG in all of our different awareness campaigns and talking to corporates and traditional healers and rural outreach and churches, wherever we can, to talk more about mental health is this idea that and you've probably heard it many, many times, where we're all in the same storm, but we're all in different boats. Some of our boats are shiny, some of our boats are big, some of us boats are holding on by our bare threads. Looking now 2 years later in COVID, some of our boats have water in, some of our boats have disappeared and we're actually sharing boats with other people. Some of our boats are being held together by duct tape, but we're all still together in the same storm. And for a lot of us feeling overwhelmed and alone and feeling like where is the next step? It's knowing that we're not alone and that there is help. One of my favorite analogies that I like to use in the stories that I tell, and especially on your next step and your next journey beyond this graduation event this evening, where you're celebrated and honored for the hard work that you have done. But it's to say, where to from here? Who is this for? What now? The story of the little girl who's walking on the beach, and a man comes to the beach and he's going for a walk, and it's stormy and grey, pretty much like what today looked like. And he sees this little girl far on the beach, and she keeps bending down, picking something up and throwing it back in the ocean. And he thinks, this is so strange, what is she doing? And she keeps going and bending down, picking something up and throwing it back in the ocean. And he has to go find out more. And he goes to her and he says, what are you doing? Why? And you can see that the beach where she's walking has hundreds and hundreds of starfish that are now stuck on the beach, and she's bending down, picking up one at a time and throwing it as hard as she can into the ocean. And he says, but what are you doing? You're never going to get through all of these starfish. There's too many. And she says to him, as she picks one up from the beach, and she says, but for this starfish, they will survive. And this is what matters. And she throws it back into the ocean, and she keeps bending down and throwing it back. Perhaps you are the starfish that someone else is saving and giving another chance and throwing back into the ocean. Or you can be the little girl on the beach that picks up that starfish and gives them another chance and gives them a little bit of hope. And I hope that wherever you go and whoever you're working with and whoever you're speaking with, that you take a little bit of the message that mental health does matter. And it starts by having more conversations, having connected conversations, whether it be even with yourself or someone in your team, or perhaps even someone in your social circle, your family, a friend, someone who just needs to know, hey, how are you? And that it's okay not to be okay. A last mention is that there is no health without mental health. And it's so important that through you, we're able to change the stigma of mental health in South Africa. My extended congratulations to each and every one of you. I look forward to seeing where you take this big message. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Cassie. Mental health does matter. I would like now to call on the Temba Youth Choir. The Temba Youth Choir is made up of youth So the Temba Youth Choir is made up of youth, primarily from the Temba Lutheran Church. The aim behind the formation of this choir was to try and unleash talent from the youth and keep the youth busy with activities that build and nourish cultural activities. We aim to make sure our youth is not finding itself hooked in wrong things, e.g., the use of drugs, alcohol, etc., and thus cultivate a culture of recreational activities through song and dance. Thank you, Temba Youth Choir. I request the Managing Director to award the certificates of completion for the FPD Yale Advanced Health Management Program, Higher Certificate in Management, Higher Certificate in Practice Management, Advanced Certificate in Management, Advanced Certificate in Health Management, Advanced Certificate in Monitoring and Evaluation, Advanced Diploma in Aesthetic Medicine, Postgraduate Diploma in Health Professions Education and Leadership, Postgraduate Diploma in Distance Higher Education, to those individuals whose names appear on the program.
I award these certificates and diplomas to those individuals whose names appear in the program.
FPD Yale Advanced Health Management Program. Mrs. J. Berger. Mrs. H. Kruger. Mr. M. Lashmia. Supposed to mention. Mr. K.N. Lekoko. Ms. N. Nkambule, cum laude. Ms. T.B. Suban. Mrs. J. van Eerden, cum laude. Ms. Y. van Jaarsveld, cum laude. Ms. J. Berger, Ms. H. Kruger, and Mr. Lashmia have also graduated cum laude. The following students are graduating virtually on the FPD Yale Advanced Health Management Program. Mrs. K.E. Daysel, cum laude. Ms. P. Gavenda, cum laude. Mrs. N. Haji, cum laude. Mr. H. Lotz, cum laude. Ms. Y.K. Mohale, cum laude. Ms. A. Moodley, cum laude. Mrs. S. Naidu, cum laude. Mr. S. G. Nganana. Mr. S. O. Poswa. Ms. K. Pillay, cum laude. Mrs. B. Pretorius, cum laude. And Ms. D. Singh. This concludes the awards for the FPD Yale Advanced Health Management Program. Thank you, Mrs. Stacy Pillay. Can Mr. Tatenda Mapesa please step forward? Higher Certificate in Management. Mr. M.S. Buthelezi. Ms. U. Chetty, cum laude. Mr. S. Haduth, cum laude. Mrs. M.S. Humer. Mrs. S. Kietzi, cum laude. Ms. M.D. Khanaga. Mr. M.M. Kalala, cum laude. Miss M.A. Koloba. Miss M.L. Langdon, cum laude. Miss F. Latib, cum laude. Miss P.K. Mackenzie, cum laude. Mrs. M.V. Mahlangu. Miss M.A. Muhlakwana, cum laude. Mr. Z. Morkel, cum laude. Mrs. B.M. Nkunda, cum laude. Mr. J. Notnagel, cum laude. Mrs. D.C. Nyofane, cum laude. Mrs. Z. Palmer, cum laude. Mrs. T. Kolditz, cum laude. Miss S.H. Mahobato. Mr. I.P. Bito. Mrs. M.A. Stemet. Mrs. F. Suleiman, cum laude. Mr. P.S. Van Staden, cum laude. Mrs. A.C.M. Vessels, cum laude. The following students are graduating virtually on higher certificate in management. Mrs. N.A. Bartlett, cum laude. Mr. A. Boom, cum laude. Mrs. J. Klute. Miss C.M. Dichale, cum laude. Mrs. M.A.C. Engelbrecht, cum laude. Mrs. E. Hills, cum laude. Mr. E.C. Isaacs. Mr. M. Markgraaf, cum laude. Miss C.M. Mutau, cum laude. Mrs. S.C. Mati. Mrs. N. Ross, cum laude. Miss J.I. Swanepo, cum laude. Mrs. Y. van der Walt. Mrs. M. van Vliet, cum laude. This concludes the awards for the Higher Certificate in Management. Higher Certificate in Practice Management. Mrs. J. Foree, cum laude. Dr. K.C. Mutlawung. Dr. I.P. Khadebe, cum laude. Dr. M.L. Sidati. Mrs. L.R. Fairvey, cum laude. This concludes the awards for the Higher Certificate in Practice Management.
Advanced Certificate in Management. Ms. L.A. DeFos. Ms. L. De Weert. Dr. C.J. Henley Smith. Mr. R.M. Mawarire. And they are all cum laude. Dr. S. Shamu, cum laude. Ms. S. D. A. Smaalberger. This concludes the award for the Advanced Certificate in Management. Health management. Advanced Certificate in Health Management. Ms. C.G. Lemon. Mr. M.D. Makafula. This concludes the awards for the Advanced Certificate in Health Management. Advanced Certificate in Monitoring and Evaluation. Mr. M.R. Atwood. Mr. H.S. Perez, cum laude. Ms. L.A. Garishe. Mr. C. Ludaga. Ms. Z. Mabai, cum laude. Mrs. P.S. Mabale, cum laude. Mr. N.V. Malachi. Ms. Elsie Madid. Ms. N. Maweni. Mr. T.R.P. Mbata. Ms. M. Modisa Dife. Ms. S. Mtwa. Ms. N.Z.E. Mzimela. Mr. S.S. Ndwandwe. Mr. B. Nombozolo. Ms. M.V. Ramperi. Mr. U. Sijai. Mr. M. Sikota. Cum laude. Ms. O.N. Soji. Mr. M. Solomon. Ms. N. Sompini. Ms. W. V. Tsitsi. Mr. S. Zikubu, cum laude. This concludes the awards for the Advanced Certificate in Monitoring and Evaluation.
Where are we? Thank you, Mr. Tatenda Mapisa. Can Dr. Ricky Smith please step forward? Advanced Diploma in Aesthetic Medicine. Dr. K.F. Ensley, cum laude. Dr. R. Baloyi. Dr. S.M.T. Biela, cum laude. Dr. R.J. Britz, cum laude. Dr. C.B. Uzokwe. Dr. P.P. Kupsami, cum laude. Dr. Vijay Dakonseikau, cum laude. Dr. F. Manikem, cum laude. Dr. M.G. Mantada, cum laude. Dr. M. Radadi, cum laude. Dr. A. Riedas, cum laude. Dr. S.E. Tienesen, cum laude. Dr. C.J. White, cum laude. This concludes the awards for the Advanced Diploma in Aesthetic Medicine. Thank you, Dr. Ricky Smith. Can Prof. Diane Manning please step forward? Postgraduate Diploma in Health Professions Education and Leadership. Miss A. Furi, cum laude. Dr. M.N.S. Janse van Rensburg, cum laude. Mrs. S.A. Pillay, cum laude. This concludes the awards for the Postgraduate Diploma in Health Professions Education and Leadership. Postgraduate Diploma in Distance Higher Education. Mr. K. Simelane. This concludes the awards for the Postgraduate Diploma in Distance Higher Education. Thank you, Dr. Gustav Wolfert and Prof. Diane Manning. You may take your seats. I would now like to call Dr. Gustav Wolfert and Dr. Mvuyisi Mzukwa to the front to do the next awards.
Okay, so this is the fun part. Who were the people who did the best? So annually, we recognize the students who have shown extraordinary dedication and commitment for the duration of the program. And think about this, people. These are people who studied, did extremely well during the pandemic. So at a minimum, to get onto the stage, you need to have got your degree cum laude, and you saw there was a lot of bright people. But this is the best of the best. So I would like to congratulate everybody who were at the top of their class. On the FPD Yale Advanced Health Management Program, Miss A. Moodley. She's unfortunately not here tonight. The best student, the best student, higher certificate in management, MPK Mackenzie. Well done. Best Student, Higher Certificate in Practice Management, Mrs. J. Fourie. Best Student in the Advanced Certificate in Management, Ms. L.A. De Vos. Okay, unfortunately, the next group of people who did best in class are not here, but Best Student in the Advanced Certificate in Monitoring and Evaluation, Ms. O. Kayiso. Best Student in the Advanced Diploma in Aesthetic Medicine, Dr. M. Rupping. Best Student in the Postgraduate Diploma in Health Professions, Education and Leadership, Ms. K. Bernardo. Best Student Postgraduate Diploma in Distance Higher Education, Mrs. M. Kruger. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. By virtue of the powers vested in me in terms of the statute of the Foundation for Professional Development, I now dissolve this congregation. But you can't go anywhere. So, thank you. I love it. People send me a thing that says, I can improvise. What were they thinking? Right, so first, in the joyfulness of this occasion, I loved it. The people who brought their own praise singers, well done. Right, give them a round of applause. This really was a joyful graduation, and it is wonderful to have people in person here. I know we're all still learning to live with COVID, but everybody was here, and the people who joined us online, congratulations. And yeah, you deserve that. You stuck it out, didn't matter what the world threw at you, and you finished. And I think you should celebrate it and realize, and Cassie said it, quoting the immortal Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility. And all of you are leaders. You are part of the elite in this country. And I do want you to go from this graduation and use your qualifications for good. Because we live in a country where I feel almost every day there is a battle between good and evil. Somebody said to me the other day, this is the most wonderful country to stay in as long as you don't watch the news. Let's face it, my generation has created a lot of problems. It's your generation that needs to dig us out of this. And you can only do it if you are okay. And I think what Cassie said is incredibly important, that we need to learn to realize when we're not okay. I am a healthcare professional, and I come out of that generation of where we were told you will pull yourself up by your bootstraps and you will work irrespective of what's happening. And when the pandemic, about 2 weeks before the lockdowns were announced, I got contacted from the presidency, and they said, we're going to lock down the country and we need to train up our healthcare professionals. And we need you guys to do it. And everybody at FPD rallied to that thing. But we worked 60, 80 hours a week. I lost something like 15 kilograms which unfortunately has come back in spades. And, there was the most incredible support. On our stage is Professor Engelbrecht and Professor Lalou. They very rapidly developed the first online program for Africa on respiratory support for patients living with COVID. And we got that thing out, and we got it out to thousands of people across the country. Eventually, people from 92 countries did this course for free. And it saved lives, right? Huge amounts of people. And they haven't stopped, right? So they and the team here on the stage have, during the COVID period, I think we trained up 100,000 healthcare professionals online. My friend Tapelo, stick up your hand, Tapelo. There's Tapelo. Dr. Tapelo is from Right to Care. They have sponsored, he's actually sponsored through 2 of these programs. I think we reached about 30,000 healthcare professionals from 92 countries. Right. And in a world where if you're rich, everything comes your way, having people like employers like Ampath, funders like USAID, CDC, Right to Care, and all the others who actually step in to help bring high quality education to people across our continent for free, is an incredible privilege to work with people like that. So thank you very much from my side. And I'm a child from the Madiba era, when South Africans showed how we could overcome huge adversity. And when I specialized in internal medicine, and I had this clear career path. I was going to go into private practice. I was going to get stinking rich, and I was going to drive a Porsche. And I had terrible timing, because Madiba appeared on the scene, and suddenly my dreams seemed to be so trivial. So I tried to find a way of making a difference, and I've spent my whole career in health systems strengthening public health. And I've met the most incredible people like Tapelo and Ian Zana at Right to Care. And we've made a difference, right? So the same way that Cassie said earlier, 1 out of 3 of us will have a mental health condition. We also started working about 20 years plus ago, when 1 out of every 3 of us was probably HIV positive, and drugs were unaffordable and people were dying. And we saw how we could bring together people to make a difference. And it's been a difficult 20 years. But we've saved millions and millions of lives with the support from international donors, and after the days of AIDS denialism, the support of the government. So as the COVID pandemic kicked in, it felt to me very much like that. Everybody steps up, everybody helps, everybody makes a difference, and you saw it. And then we got hit by corruption scandal after corruption scandal. And one day I woke up after the digital vibe scandal, and I realized I don't like my job anymore. And I started wondering whether I'd wasted my whole career. Shouldn't I have just been selfish and gone into private practice, because I still don't have a bloody Porsche? And I wondered, and I'm very much South African, where stigma and self-stigma is extremely high. And I started wondering if I'm depressed. And fortunately, there are people like SADAG that give you screening questionnaires. And I filled this thing in, and I realized I was depressed. You know, with the scandals evolving around the previous Minister of Health, who in my eyes had always been one of the good guys, one of the people who had stood up in AIDS denialism to make sure we got treatment to people. It's completely acceptable to understand that it gets you down. So for the first time in my life, I engaged with the counselors, and for the first time in my life, I saw a psychiatrist and I got onto treatment. And it was the best thing I have ever done. I can't believe that I had not done this before. Because you can't care for other people if you're not okay. You've got to get okay. And I tell you, a few months later, in my family, somebody presented with genuinely serious mental health conditions and was in a very vulnerable and abandoned state. And I could step in to help, but I would not have been able to do it if I had not admitted to myself that I was not okay and got the treatment to make sure I'm okay. So I want to ask all of you, be honest with yourself. This South African bullshit about we never show weakness, especially the healthcare professionals. I can also give you the stats, right? Burnout and amongst healthcare professionals is running at 60 to 80%. Right? We've asked people to go, think about this. We asked nurses and doctors to work on the front lines with dodgy PPE equipment procured or often just not available, right? And they've been doing that for years before. They did it for a year before the vaccines became available. And they did it and they saved people's lives. But we need to owe it to ourselves and to everybody around us to be honest with ourselves, to talk about mental health, and to do something. If you're not okay, contact the good people at SADC. They provide services for free. There's not much you get for free in this country. So thank you very much, everybody. It has been a great privilege and a pleasure, and I do think this has been the funnest graduation and the most joyful one that I've ever attended. And I've been doing this for a long time. So well done, everybody. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, in that spirit of joyfulness, please stand for the national anthem and remain standing afterwards.
No